I'm ready to make a change. Thus, here's my heart of anger. Replace and rearrange it. See, I need freedom for me to be all I can be. He'll look from heaven and see. I wanna fly away, far away from this place. Nobody can bring me down. Nobody can bring me down. I wanna fly away, far away from this place. Nobody can bring me down. Nobody can bring me down. This is a moment to make a blanket statement, but I changed my mind, I can't relate it. I'm on a quest for greatness. For now I'm learning patience, but the neshama inside is filled with many places. It's filled with many places, many stations, many seasons.
Good evening, my holy sisters and brothers. That was Nissim Black singing and Moshe Storch playing guitar when Nissim was a guest on our show some time ago before COVID. How you doing? Let's light up the darkness. Who is with us as we do some beautiful learning on a Tuesday evening? Yehudit in South Carolina. Bella Rubin says shalom. Paula sends a flower. James says shalom. Tom in PA. John in Sedona. Lucy in Minnesota. Stu in Cleveland. Welcome to the show. Charles Willery in Louisiana, PK in Colorado, Jennifer in Ocala, Carolyn in Raleigh, Lynn in North Texas. Welcome, everybody. Today's episode of AT Daily is sponsored by Mark and Samay Deweese Cooper. In honor, they want to dedicate the June 8th learning in memory of R.V. Cooper, who is Mark's father, whose yahrzeit is observed today. May R.V. Cooper's memory always be for a blessing. May his neshama, his soul, have a great elevation in the world of souls. And Mark, may you and Samay be showered in blessings. We thank you so much for our support and enabling us to reach more people with more Torah here at Accidental Talmudist Daily. We say amen, that you should all be showered in blessings. Okay, we are starting a new Mishna today. Mishna number 5 here in chapter 5 in tractate Yoma. This is the 6th volume of the Talmud, the laws of Yom Kippur. We've been working our way through the avodah, the service of the high priest on Yom Kippur when the temple was standing in Jerusalem. We're actually finishing the discussion of Mishnah number 4 on the A side here of page 58. We're on page 58, Daf Nun Ches. But we're not going to cover in detail the remainder of the discussion that we started yesterday. The bottom line is that Rami Bar Chama raised 2 dilemmas before Rav Chisda, and he asked when the high priest collects the blood of the bull for sprinkling in the Holy of Holies and in the sanctuary, what happens if when he pours the blood into the vessel, he then puts that vessel inside another vessel. In other words, there's a bowl between his hands and the bowl that contains the bull's blood. Does that create an interposition which would disqualify that part of the service? The answer is no, because the outer bowl is also a sacred vessel and it's considered nullified as if the priest's hands were on the inner vessel. What about if the bowl was lined with bast? Interesting word, bast. These are the kind of the fibrous stuff that grows on the outside of a palm tree. You could make like sort of packing for delicate objects when you're shipping them in a crate. Maybe that's what they used it for in the ancient world when they didn't have, the modern styrofoam corn that Amazon has. But what if that bast was in the bowl when the priest received the blood? Would that form an interposition that would disqualify receiving the blood before sprinkling? Answer, no, because the blood penetrates the bast. But if during a regular day of the year, the high priest was going to bring his meal offering, the daily meal offering, which really consists of some dough, some wheat dough. So if that was collected in a sacred vessel, but there was bast between the vessel and the dough, it would form an interposition and it would disqualify the service. And we're reminded in that discussion that the priests at all times served all through the year, ordinary priests as well as the high priest, in their bare feet. Because if their feet were not touching the floor of the temple, that would disqualify the services that they were conducting at that moment. So there's always, all kinds of regulations and restrictions on their behavior. There's really nothing random that's done in the temple, in the Holy Temple when it's standing. Everything is very much orchestrated, and the priests are so careful to always be following the law and doing it the right way, as we'll see in today's discussion. Okay. Now we go on to the fifth Mishnah here in chapter 5. We'll read the Mishnah and then we'll read the Gemara that discusses it. Ahem. Okay, so it is stated, "And he shall go out to the altar that is before the Lord, and make atonement for it, and he shall take of the blood of the bull and of the blood of the goat and place it upon the corners of the altar round about." That's Leviticus 16:18. So we're working our way through the avoda of the high priest on Yom Kippur. And what we've already covered is that the goat, the bull that atones for himself, his family, and the fellow priests, as well as the goat that makes an atonement for the nation, they were slaughtered. Their blood was collected in separate vessels. He entered the Holy of Holies. He brought the coal pan and the incense. There was a cloud of incense. He left the Holy of Holies. He took the blood of the bull. He went into the Holy of Holies. He sprinkled it once up, 7 times down. He left the Holy of Holies. He went back in with the blood of the goat, sprinkled once and then 7 more times, left the Holy of Holies, then repeated the sprinklings, first of the bull and then of the goat, toured the curtain that separates between the sanctuary and the Holy of Holies. And now we come to the next step. And we already kind of introduced that next step, that he's going to make a sprinkling on the golden altar. The golden altar is the incense altar that is inside the sanctuary, as distinct from the main altar, the outer altar, which is in the courtyard of the temple in front, outside of the sanctuary, and in front of it, that's where the animal offerings are brought when they're going to go up in smoke on the altar. He's going to have to do some work with the outer altar as well. But right now we're talking about the inner altar. He is going to do a sprinkling, and this is going to be an atonement, not just for the nation, which is what he was doing, atoning for the nation's sins in the Holy of Holies and outside by the curtain. Now he's going to make a more specific atonement for the altar itself, because it might be that during the year, sometimes incense was offered on that altar and it was brought in a state of impurity. Either a priest was impure or somehow the incense became impure. And to make an atonement for those errors on Yom Kippur, the Torah tells us he has to make a sprinkling on the altar. So now we're discussing the manner of that sprinkling on the inner altar. This altar is the golden altar, since the outer altar is not before the Lord. So we have this term, asher lifnei Hashem, that is before the Lord, right? So before the Lord, it's a word that comes up a lot in the prayer book, lifnei, before, and what does it mean? It doesn't mean before in time. It means in front of, but in relationship to, not, somewhere in front of it, but near enough that you are before the Lord. If you're too far away, it's like you're not before the Lord, right? So we're going to make more of this phrase being lifnei Hashem, before the Lord. So he began to cleanse. The outer altar is not before the Lord because, right, before the Lord means you're either in the sanctuary or more properly where the divine presence is really set to rest, inside the Holy of Holies. So if you're in the sanctuary, at least there's only a partition between you and the Holy of Holies. If you're outside of the temple proper, outside of the sanctuary, you're out there in the courtyard where the outer altar is, you're said to be not before the Lord, at least with regard to the service of Yom Kippur. He began to cleanse the altar, sprinkling the blood downward. From where does he begin? He begins from the northeast corner, and he proceeds to the northwest corner, and then to the southwest corner, and finally to the southeast corner. And a way to remember this is at the place where he begins sprinkling the blood for a sin offering, sacrifice on the outer altar, which is he begins at the southeast corner out there. There he finishes sprinkling the blood on the inner altar. So that's, it's a little confusing when you just hear it, but if we kind of illustrate this a little bit, let me just make a little drawing here. I have it in my notes in the margin. Right, 3, 4. So we have this kind of arrangement that this would be the inner altar, and nothing is to scale here. The inner altar is much smaller than the outer altar, but this is like a real separation. There's going to be a doorway here, but this is the wall that separates the sanctuary from the courtyard. Right, so once he comes inside, he would encounter the inner altar, the incense altar. He walked past it and went into the Holy of Holies to do his stuff there. Then the curtain is here, the partition, right, between the sanctuary and the Holy of Holies. Now he comes out to the outer altar, and they're telling us that he's going to start in the northeast corner. East because that's, east is sort of toward the main gates of the temple, which would be over there in this illustration. And west is inward toward the sanctuary and then the Holy of Holies. So he begins here in the northeast corner, then northwest, then southwest, and then he finishes in the southeast corner. When they're applying blood to the horns of the altar for sin offerings, that's done every day in the temple. They would begin down here in the southeast corner and then go to the northeast, northwest, and finish in the southwest corner. So it's a little bit, they're going in the same direction is the key. And because when they're doing it on the altar, they're walking like this. And going counterclockwise. But around the inner altar, he's standing around it and kind of walking around that altar in that direction, right? Counterclockwise. And when he's standing at each place, the next place he goes is to his right, right? He goes to his right, then he's standing here, then he goes to his right, then he's standing here, and then he goes to his right. And we want him going to his right whenever possible. As we've seen, the tradition, consistently prioritizes the right side over the left side. And we learn that when the attributes of God are sort of attributed to God, Kabbalistically in Jewish mysticism, that the attribute of mercy is associated with the right side of God, and the attribute of justice is associated with the left side. And since we always want to invoke God's mercy on us, the high priest, especially on Yom Kippur, is going to make right turns whenever possible. Rabbi Eliezer says the priest would not circle the altar. Rather, he stood in one place and sprinkled the blood from there. Since the altar was only 1 square cubit, he could sprinkle the blood on all 4 corners without moving. Rabbi Eliezer is the minority opinion, and the halacha goes with the majority who say that he walked around that inner altar. Rabbi Eliezer was saying, why is it necessary to walk around? It's very small. It's only like this, right? It's sort of like about the size of an album cover. If you know what that is, you're my age. Kids are buying albums now. But at any rate, he could have just reached over quite easily to sprinkle blood on the corners. But out of respect to the inner altar, he circles it. And on all the corners, he would present the blood from below upward. So he kind of like go up like this and let the blood fall in, except for that corner that was directly before him, on which he would present the blood from above downward. And that was to prevent the blood from splattering onto his, white linen garments. And he's, where am I? Downward. And he sprinkled blood. And then he sprinkled blood on the pure gold of the altar 7 times after clearing away the ashes. So his job was to sprinkle a little bit of this blood on. This is the mixed blood, as we saw yesterday, of the blood of the bull and the goat. And he would sprinkle some on each of the 4 corners just once. And that's why we know that they mixed the bull and the goat blood, so that he would only sprinkle once at each corner and yet use the blood of both animals. And then he would scrape the ashes to the side of this is the incense altar, and he would pour a little bit onto the altar itself 7 times. And he would pour the remainder of the blood on the western base of the outer altar. So now he's going to leave the sanctuary, walk outside, and go where? Right, when he walks outside, he's going to, right there is the outer altar, which has a ramp, and we've talked about how there were times when the ordinary priests used to race up that ramp to try to, win a contest to see who would do certain duties each day, until they did away with that because it became dangerous. So that's the outer altar. It's right outside the doors of the sanctuary, and he's going to take the remaining blood, mixed blood of the bull and the goat, and he has to dispose of it. How is he going to dispose of it? He's going to dispose of it in the way that the excess blood of all animal offerings is disposed of in the temple. He pours it out on the western base of the outer altar. On a related topic, the Mishna teaches that he would pour the remaining blood of an offering after it was sprinkled on the outer altar on its southern base. And so normally it's on the southern base. Today it's on the western base on Yom Kippur. These remainders of blood from the outer altar and those remainders of blood from the inner altar are mixed in the canal beneath the altar, and they flow out with the water used to rinse the area to the Kidron River. So we've covered this a little bit before, and now we see it again, that there was a beautiful system. They were quite advanced, right? When they built the first temple, and again in the second temple, there was a drainage system beneath the floor of the courtyard and around the altar, etc. I mean, they were slaughtering a lot of animals, particularly on Passover when everyone was bringing those paschal offerings, and there were so many lambs and kid goats slaughtered in that courtyard, and there was a lot of blood there, and they had to, get rid of it so that it wouldn't be a foul and awful place. So they had a system where the blood could seep down into these drainage pipes, and there was water that was moving through those pipes as well, and all of it would flow out to the east, right? It would flow to the east of the temple complex, and then out into the valley that separates between the Temple Mount and the Mount of Olives. And that valley has at the bottom of it the Kidron River. So the Kidron River is still there. It's foul and quite polluted. And there is an organization and an effort to clean up that river and make it ecologically beautiful again. But it's difficult because this is in Jerusalem, and that river flows through both Jewish areas and non-Jewish areas in eastern Jerusalem, and getting everybody to cooperate. It's not just an emotional thing, it's a political thing. There's a lot going on. Hopefully, maybe sooner than when Mashiach comes, or maybe Mashiach will come today and then it'll get cleaned up. But at any rate, God willing, that river will get cleaned up. In ancient times, it was quite clean. It was just beautiful spring water that was going through there, but also, the blood of offerings that were offered in the temple. So you might think, oh, well, blood, that's so gross. If blood was getting into the water that was going into that river, I guess people stayed away from that river and didn't want anything to do with it, right? Wrong. So the remainders of the blood from the outer altar and those remainders of blood from the inner altar are mixed in the canal beneath the altar, and they flow out with the water used to rinse the area to the Kidron River. This water was sold to gardeners for use as fertilizer. And the gardeners paid for this water and thereby redeemed it from sanctity. Failure to do so would render them guilty of misuse of consecrated property. So this blood, even though it's sort of like the runoff, the waste essentially of bringing animal offerings in the temple, those animals were all sacred animals. They had become the property of the temple and of God. So even though this blood is running off, it's not needed. You can't, as a farmer, and let's say that this water with blood in it is very good fertilizer. It's good irrigation for crops. It has that organic matter in it. You can't just use it for your crops because you would be using something that has been consecrated, something that belongs to the temple. And there's a harsh penalty for that. You cannot use for your own use anything that has been consecrated for holy use. However, its sanctity is pretty low. It's already been offered. So all you need to do is redeem it for money. In other words, you can pay for it. The farmers would pay for it. So that money was received by the treasurer of the temple, as it were, and that money would then go, into the collection box for free will offerings that were brought from time to time when the altar was idle, so that the offerings could be brought on behalf of the nation. So the farmers could use that water; they just had to pay for it. Once they paid for it, the money that was used to pay for it became consecrated, went into the temple treasury. And then the thing that was paid for became deconsecrated, and it could be used to irrigate and fertilize crops. That's the Mishnah, Mishnah number 5. Now the Gemara. The sages taught, and he shall go out to the altar. What is the meaning of this verse? It means that upon his exit, after sprinkling toward the curtain, the high priest must necessarily reach the golden altar. That means that he was standing at the curtain in the back of the sanctuary, sprinkling toward the curtain. That means that he had his back to the golden altar, and he will pass the golden altar as he's leaving the sanctuary. Rabbi Nehemiah said, it is because we find with regard to the bull brought for a violation of all the mitzvahs, in other words, the bull that must be brought as an offering in the event that the community makes an error with regard to any of the mitzvahs, right? When the leadership makes a mistake and makes a decree, and then the people follow that decree, and the leaders were wrong, so then the people have actually made a transgression. So a bull is brought on those situations as an offering, and it's a different procedure than the bull of Yom Kippur. Its blood is sprinkled in the sanctuary, but it's sprinkled toward the curtain from much further away. Not with a priest standing right in front of the curtain, as the high priest does on Yom Kippur, but rather with a priest standing behind the incense altar and just sprinkling from a large distance toward the back of the sanctuary. As we learned yesterday, that Rabbi Elazar saw the evidence of that when he went to Rome on a mission, helped Caesar by saving his daughter from a demonic possession. If you missed yesterday's class, it was a good one. And then he was rewarded that he could go into the store, the royal storeroom, and see all the booty and treasures of Rome. And there he saw the curtain from the Second Temple that had been sacked by Rome, and the curtain was stolen and brought to Rome. And he saw the pattern of the sprinkling on that curtain, and he saw that for Yom Kippur it was just drops in a row, very close in a pattern. And then these other drops at a much more scattered and fewer of them, and that's from the bull of this error, communal error. So Rabbi Nehemiah says, it is because we find with regard to that bull brought for communal error, that when the priest sprinkles toward the curtain, he stands past the altar and sprinkles back toward the curtain. Therefore, one might have thought that here, with regard to the bull of Yom Kippur, the rite should be performed in the same manner. And therefore, the verse states, and he shall go out to the altar. Where was he before? He was on the inner side of the altar. So the fact that when he finishes sprinkling on the curtain, he goes out to the altar, says the Torah, tells us that he needs to go out to the altar. So he was already standing inside of the altar and much closer to the curtain. From the fact that he has to go out to the altar, we understand where he was standing when he sprinkled toward the curtain. It was taught in another baraisa with regard to the bull for an unwitting communal sin. The verse states, and he shall sprinkle 7 times before the Lord in front of the curtain. That's Leviticus 4:17. What is the meaning when the verse states before the Lord? He shall sprinkle 7 times before the Lord. So what does it mean when the verse says before the Lord? And Rabbi Nehemiah said, it is because we find with regard to the bull and the goat of Yom Kippur that when he sprinkles, the high priest stands on the inner side of the altar close to the curtain, and he sprinkles toward the curtain. Therefore, one might have thought that here too, in the case of the bull for an unwitting communal sin, it would be the same rite. Therefore, the verse states, and the priest shall put the blood upon the corners of the altar of sweet incense before the Lord, which is in the tent of meeting. This verse teaches that the altar is before the Lord, but the priest is not before the Lord. How so? The priest stands on the outer side of the altar and sprinkles toward the back of the sanctuary. So that's how they derive that on Yom Kippur, he's near those curtains, and for other bulls of communal sin on other days, he stands much further away on the other side of the inner altar. The Mishnah taught, he began to cleanse the altar, sprinkling the blood downward. And the sages taught in a baraisa, he began to cleanse downward. From where would he begin? He would begin from the southeast corner of the altar. And from there, he would turn to the southwest corner, onward to the northwest corner, and finally to the northeast corner. This is the statement of Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Yosei HaGalili says, he began from the northeast corner, from which he turned to the northwest, and then to the southwest, and then to the southeast corner. And as I showed before, it's that second opinion. He starts in the northeast corner, and then he walks around to the northwest, the southwest, and then the southeast. So that's the opinion of Rabbi Yosei HaGalili. Rabbi Akiva got it wrong. At least the halacha did not accord with Rabbi Akiva. The halacha, the law, the final ruling accords with Rabbi Yosei HaGalili in this question. And the Gemara notes, the place where the high priest begins, according to the opinion of Rabbi Yosei HaGalili, i.e. the northeast corner, there is where Rabbi Akiva says he ends. And the place where the high priest begins, according to the opinion of Rabbi Akiva, the southeast corner, that's where Rabbi Yosei HaGalili says he ends. And the Gemara asks, well, everyone agrees in any case that he does not perform the service at the corner that he encounters first. Since the high priest approaches the altar from the west side, right? So he's approaching from the curtain, which is over there, and the Holy of Holies is over there. So he's coming this way. So everyone agrees that he doesn't start here, right? He's going to have to go around and start over here, according to Rabbi Yosei HaGalili, or over here, according to Rabbi Akiva. They both agree that what he doesn't do is start on one of the corners that he encounters first when he's coming that way. Why is that a surprise? Because when we have an opportunity to do a mitzvah, to perform an obligation, to fulfill a commandment, we generally do that as soon as we have the opportunity. So if the high priest is going to encounter these corners first, why doesn't he start at those corners is the question that's now being asked. Now, what is the reason for this, that he doesn't start with the corners that he encounters first? And Shmuel said, the reason is that the verse states, and he shall go out to the altar, which indicates that he does not begin until he goes out from the sacred area, which is beyond the entire area of the altar. He has to be further away from the Holy of Holies than the altar, the incense altar, when he begins this part of the service. At this stage, he is no longer on the western side of the altar, but on the eastern side. The Gemara asks, and according to the opinion of Rabbi Akiva, let him go around via the right, since the high priest, so he has to go around to here. He has to be standing here when he starts. So now they're asking, according to the opinion of Rabbi Akiva, let him go around via the right. Since the high priest is standing on the eastern side of the altar, facing west, the corner on his right is the northeast corner. That's Rabbi Yosei HaGalili's opinion, and that is the law. That's how it ends it up, because he's making a right turn to get started. So why does Rabbi Akiva say, no, he's going to start on the left? What's to his left? Why would he do that? We always want him going to the right. So let us say that since the high priest is standing on the eastern side of the altar, facing the west, the corner on his right is the northeast one. Let us say that they disagree, Rabbi Yosei and Rabbi Akiva, that they disagree with regard to the opinion of Rami bar Yecheskel. I'm almost done, so if you've got questions or comments, get them in. As Rami bar Yecheskel said, a verse describes the sea, which is a term used in this case for the massive basin that Solomon built, in the following terms. So this is going to be second book of Chronicles 4:4. I don't have an illustration here handy, but there was a massive basin like that you could, swim in, like almost like a small pool, that was in the first temple. So imagine a bowl, but a bowl that's so large that a person could swim in. It could certainly immerse in it. And that basin, that bowl, is perched on top of the backs of 12 bulls. It's almost like if you've ever been to Wall Street and you see that, that Wall Street bull, that famous Wall Street bull that's down there near Wall Street. So imagine 12 bulls like that and this massive basin on top of them. And the bulls are all facing outward. So you see the huge bowl, and then underneath it, there would be bulls' faces, facing you if you were looking at this thing called the Sea of Solomon, S-E-A, the Sea of Solomon. So the description in the Bible, it stood upon 12 oxen, 3 looking toward the north, and 3 looking toward the west, and 3 looking toward the south, and 3 looking toward the east. 3 looking toward they start with the north. 3 looking to the north, then to the west, then to the south, then to the east. So they're describing this same counterclockwise the order of describing these bulls in which way they were facing when they stood beneath the Sea of Solomon. And from the direction in which the text lists the groups of oxen underneath the basin, you learn that all turns that you turn, meaning that a priest turns in the temple complex, should be only to the right and to the east side. Let us say that this sage, Rabbi Yosei HaGalili, is of the opinion that the ruling is in accordance with the opinion of Rami bar Yecheskel, that you should always be making right turns. And this sage, Rabbi Akiva, is of the opinion that the ruling is not in accordance with the opinion of Rami bar Yecheskel. But the Gemara, and you might have thought of Zoolander, right? That comedy with Ben Stiller, where he was a model. He was a runway model who was handicapped that he couldn't make left turns. But he would be okay if he was a priest. So the Gemara rejects this suggestion. No, everyone is of the opinion that the ruling is in accordance with the opinion of Rami bar Yecheskel. But here they disagree with regard to this matter. One sage, Rabbi Yosei HaGalili, holds we derive the order of the rite inside the sanctuary from the manner of the sprinkling on the outside at the outer altar. And just as the priest sprinkles on the corners of the outer altar in that order and moving in that direction, he sprinkles similarly on the inner altar. And the other sage, Rabbi Akiva, holds we do not derive the order of the rite inside the sanctuary from the rite performed outside. So according to Rabbi Akiva, perhaps the reason he rules the way he rules is because he doesn't think that the rules of the outer altar apply to the inner altar. And anyway, we don't really have an explanation why Rabbi Akiva would have had him turn to the left in the beginning and not to the right always, but the law accords with Rabbi Yosei in this matter. All right, let's go to questions and comments. Tom, is there an altar inside the Holy of Holies? Who cleans its ashes? Answer, no, there's no altar inside the Holy of Holies. And that's why he brings a coal pan with him, with coals in it when he comes in to burn the incense. Right, he brings coals with him in that special once-a-year dedicated coal pan that's made of a reddish gold, the finest gold there is, and he brings his coals with him. So there's no altar in there. In the tabernacle and in the first temple, the Ark of the Covenant was in there, along with some other objects that we've talked about, the jar of manna, the staff of Aaron, etc. But the main thing was the Ark of the Covenant. In the second temple, it was just empty, but the foundation rock was there, and the place where the Ark of the Covenant had been, was empty, but they knew that that's where it used to be, and so this spot had acquired sanctity over those hundreds of years when the Ark of the Covenant stood there in the first temple. So he would bring the incense, he would do the sprinkling, but not on an altar. Then he, walked out of the Holy of Holies, went into the sanctuary, and it's in the sanctuary where we find the inner, smaller incense altar, as opposed to the outer, larger offerings, animal offerings altar that stood in the courtyard. Sharon, lifnei comes from the word penei, meaning face. Thank you, Sharon. So it is to your face or before your face. Where we were saying that lifnei Hashem means before the Lord, that something is happening, lifnei Hashem is happening before the Lord. And Sharon is telling us that the word lifnei is related to penei, right, or peni, the face. Right? And so this is happening before the face of the Lord. Therefore, in front of my students, and she's saying that sharing these kinds of translations in front of her students helps with their understanding of the matter. Thank you so much, Sharon. Bill, I was about to mention, even today, slaughterhouses, both kosher and non-kosher, occasionally offer their refuse, even the water, to gardeners. I can also attest personally that it does wonders for tomato plants. Thank you very much. So it makes sense, it made sense that the farmers would make use of that water. And, I think there's something quite beautiful about that, right? In terms of the cycle of life, that the blood of those offerings, these animals that gave up their lives, to bring an offering before the Lord, and so that it doesn't just get wasted. The animal, if it's an elevation offering, meaning a burnt offering, the animal goes up in smoke, but its blood, which is its lifeblood, right, is the most important part of the animal, its lifeblood, that ends up getting sprinkled on the altar, and the rest of it goes down into that system, goes out to the Kidron River, and in ancient times, and the farmers would purchase it, use it, to farm their land, and it would go right back into the food of the land of milk and honey. So it's a nice cycle. Tom, were the communal offerings purchased from the temple treasury? Yes. Michelle, Mickey Trester, Mickey, nice to see you here. Always great to interact with you. Mickey is an old friend of Nina's. They've known each other most of their lives. We love Mickey, and we send you a big hug. Mickey, considering the sacrifices, right on red has a literal meaning. Very good. Right on red when we're sprinkling the blood. That's a good way to remember it, that we always have to make a right turn right on red. I'm teaching my kids how to drive right now, and here in LA, where is a right on red permitted? Everywhere unless it says no. But you got to really look for those signs that say no right on red, because sometimes they're hard to see and they even get grown over by plants and stuff. All right, my friends, that's what I've got for us today. With God's help, we'll be together again tomorrow for page 59 at the regular time, 6 p.m. Pacific. Have a wonderful evening. I see there was a question about the shirt. Grateful Yid, I designed this shirt and all the other shirts that are in the Accidental Talmudist store. Some of them say Accidental Talmudist on the back. Some of them just have the wisdom candle. In fact, I think we changed it to most of them just have the wisdom candle on the back. But they're all available at shop.accidentaltalmudist.org, and they're definitely conversation starters. Have a great night.